Hi, everybody. Welcome to Life Stories Podcast, People Helping People. I'm Shara Goswick, your host. My guests today are Blake Baumann and Pickens Calhoun. Blake and Pickens are both coaches for teenagers and young adults with autism. They help them get past insecurities and fears and things that they need to let go of so that these young adults can step into the life that they were created to live. This was a very special conversation for me because, I have an adult son with autism and I have a lot to learn. Blake has written a book called Autism Launch Plan. It is on my bookshelf waiting for me to read. Honestly, I'm a little nervous about reading it, but I know it's going to be good for me and it's going to be good for my son. I loved this conversation. If you know of someone that could benefit from these services, then I encourage you to reach out to them because they're doing really great things. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much, Pickens and Blake. I'm so excited to talk to you both. As I said, this is a subject that is very near and dear to my heart. And I appreciate people who work with others with autism, who want to encourage and help however they can. I think it's so important. And, when I'm out in public and I see someone that I can tell is on the spectrum, I just want to go meet them and I want to hug them, which I don't do. But I've said 1,000 times on this podcast, I have an adult son with autism. It's a very special subject to me, but I want to know how you both got involved in coaching in the world of autism.
So the way I got started, Shara, is that my eldest son was diagnosed at 15 with Asperger's.
Okay.
And at the time, I honestly, my wife and I, we've probably only had two arguments in our entire marriage. That was one of the arguments that she wanted me to get him diagnosed. And I said, no way, no how. And finally, I gave in, got him diagnosed, and surprise, I was on the spectrum too.
Wow.
And
How did
so
that happen? Like, were you answering questions for him or about him and then you realized that was
we
possible or?
yeah, we were you have to fill out a whole bunch of
Right.
information, and as I was going through filling out this information, I'm going, "This is all normal stuff," and then when I handed into, the neuropsych, he starts going through and he starts saying, "Hey, okay, these are flags," and I'm going, "What?" And so I started talking to him and he says, "Yeah, we can actually do very rarely do we do this, but we can do a dual, diagnosis if you can answer this for yourself too on this side." So it took us about 6 hours of answering questions, doing assessments, and, um, and voila, surprise, here you are with that Asperger's diagnosis. I had no clue what that really was.
Yeah.
And I went in and started researching it and obviously the autism element of it. And now it's only known as level 1 autism and no longer do we have the Asperger's name. But when I started seeing the information, it scared me to death.
Yeah.
And that's kinda started the journey there.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It is a big deal. When my son was diagnosed, he was 5, so this was 2001. They didn't have levels back then. His diagnosis was mild to moderate. I think if he were to be assessed again today, I think it would be level 1, probably mild, but we didn't have that back then. But it's a scary thing. It's a diagnosis is a hard thing to deal with because for somebody that needs services, you have to have that diagnosis. But at the same time, like you don't necessarily want to have that. You don't want people to look at you differently or your child differently, or so I totally get that. How about you, Pickens? How did you get involved in this?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey into this kind of line of work is a little bit unconventional, but I also think my story is very like reflective of what a lot of people my age kind of experience today. And
Mhm.
so a handful of years ago, right out of college, I started my career in tax consulting. And like so many people nowadays, I essentially ended up getting replaced by AI.
Yeah.
And yeah, the funny thing is though, even though that sounds like a setback, I really do believe that the timing couldn't have been more meant to be. And so I already kind of felt this like deep pull towards making a change and helping people. And, that was part of the reason why I gravitated towards the tax consulting side. But then once you get into it, not always the case. And that, I've also indirectly supported neurodivergent family members my whole life.
Mhm.
And so it really kind of worked out perfectly. It was around that time that I approached Blake, who was a friend back then, and long before we ever imagined working together. And I told him that I wanted to pivot into helping him. And that's really what kind of became the beginning of the direction that I've helped Blake go in with this company. And
Wow.
so, what's unique about my role is that I am the youngest coach by
Mhm.
far on our team.
By far.
So I'm 26 and I'm actually very close in age to the young adults that we support on average.
Yeah.
And so, what's unique about that is that it makes me relatable in a way that I think a lot of clients really respond to.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about like social struggles, career stuff, or even like the pressure that my generation kind of feels to figure it out, we'll say, I'm speaking from like a real world, first person lived experience perspective, like not theory, we'll say.
Right.
And beyond coaching itself, Blake and I, we're both builders at heart. We're pouring ourselves into creating solutions that can transform lives and really try and transform lives at scale and try and reach as many people as we possibly can so that we can help all of the people that, really need what we do. So our mission is to really give neurodivergent teens, young adults, and their families the tools to, find hope and find strategies and pathways that, you know, they deserve essentially because it
Right.
gives them the opportunity to transform their lives.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tell me about your coaching program. And I guess I'm curious as a mom, are parents bringing their kids in? Are people signing up for this voluntarily?
With their coaching program, the way it actually got started is after the diagnosis of my son, I
Mm.
talked to him, Shara, and I said, "Hey, we need to start working on some things." And he told me politely, but he said, "I'm not ever going to go to college. I'm never getting a job. I'm never going to learn to drive, and I'm never moving out. You're stuck with me."
Mm.
And so I just thanked him for his opinion, and it triggered, uh-oh, I got to go all in and figure out this process now.
Yeah.
And so that led into a process that we have. It's called the Ideal Launch System. It's our coaching process that we have trademarked. And Ideal is an acronym.
Okay.
And so I stands for identity. We are big believers that you got to create the confidence and the identity of a person that's capable of doing anything that you want them to do, or else they won't be able to do it. And so that's the I. The D is the direction. So we have to help them figure out what is the best direction for their gifts and their genius, because we believe everybody has a genius inside them. We just have to help them unleash it. E is for more of the executive functioning and social skills. And then A is getting them to take action. And then L is the missing life skills that they need to become independent. And so when people come in, usually it's their parents that are finding us.
Mhm.
Now, most of the coaching, I'd say 99% of the coaching we do is all virtual. And so it's not like their parents are having to drag them in, but it's pretty close. It is pretty close. And the key is because of the lived experience of me being on the spectrum my entire life, raising four neurodivergent young adults that are now between 20 and 26, Pickens with his family members and close family members that he's gone through,
Yeah.
we understand and we relate. So I'll give you an example. Is I got an email literally just about 5 minutes before I jumped on
Oh,
about a potential client, and the mom was basically, she said, "Hey, I'm in tears right now. My son just says you're the very first person who ever understood where he's at right now, and that's massive. We want to try to
wow.
move forward with coaching." And it's our relatability that allows us to be able to connect with the kids. Pickens' age is absolutely an advantage.
I bet, yeah.
You don't want the gray-haired guy in there trying to tell kids how to date and relationships, and
Right.
when, I'm out of tune with dating apps and things of that nature. But, we try to keep it engaging, and we try to tap into their powers and unleash that. When we think about parents that come and find Pickens and I and the rest of our team, is they're thinking they're typically a little bit older, and they're
Mhm.
thinking, "What happens to my kids when I'm no longer here?"
Right.
And so that's where we come in and we start coaching parents and we start coaching the young adults to try to get them at a place where there's peace around gentle pushes
Yes.
and we build the confidence in the young adults so that they can move forward at the same time. And so it's a kind of a synchronicity that happens with the parents and young adults. And it's amazing because if we get you as the mom to shift just a little bit,
Yeah.
how much that small shift moves your son along as well.
Yeah, I know. I have a lot to learn too. I do, but I think what you're doing is so important for that very reason. So tell me what a coaching session looks like. You said that somebody let you know their son was so happy that somebody finally understood them. What did you do? How did you talk to them to get to that point?
Sure, and I'll let Pickens talk about the coaching session. This was actually
Yeah.
pre-coaching. So part of our
Oh,
process
okay.
is we will visit with the parents first because
Uh-huh.
parents, you got to do your fact checking and make sure. And I get that, and I
Right.
implore that you to do that.
Yeah.
So once the parents are comfortable with us, the next step is actually meeting the young adult. And
Okay.
so in this case, I met the young adult for about 15 minutes. What we want to find out in that meeting is one, we want to find out if they're coachable.
Yeah.
And then 2, we wanna find out if we can have rapport built amongst them. And then we really have 3 keys to success. And so we talk about those keys with them, and we wanna make sure the young adult has all the information in advance because they have to buy in and they have to be committed to doing the coaching process.
Yeah.
And once we get young adult committed and bought in and parents are have already approved us, then from there we get into the actual coaching. And so I'll kinda let Pickens mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So when we're talking about the actual coaching, and this is the thing where I'll tell you, all of our clients are painfully unique sometimes. I mean, it would be really nice for us if we could employ like a one size fits all approach for every client. But the reality is, everybody is unique. Now, just because they're unique doesn't mean there aren't things that rhyme between all of them. Typically, most of our clients are very high anxiety, low confidence, low self esteem. They lack career direction and they have an identity that might be holding them back in a way. And so that's where our ideal launch system really comes into play. And so there's a lot of consistency within that ideal launch system. So we do coach through a mix of, typical core coaching practices, neuroscience, structure, empathy, all those things. And we're really focused on building programs around the individual that build real world skills, help clients reframe the way they see themselves, teach confidence as both an emotion and a skill. And, that means not just working on what to do, we're also reshaping why they believe they can do things. And that shift can really change their life because, especially I preach this all the time, I believe in the growth mindset. It's not that I can't do something, it's that I can't do something yet. And
There you
just
go.
that one small difference makes such a change when somebody really starts to buy into that. And so the driving example is perfect. And so I have a young man and he thought he was never going to drive. His parents thought he was never going to drive. But once I started working with him, I could tell really quickly that he wanted to drive.
Wow.
And so it was reshifting his mindset from I won't ever be able to drive to I just can't drive yet.
Yeah.
And he just took essentially, kind of that it was he's finishing up a course, but he just finished the final for the course and he got a higher score than I think even I would have gotten if I
Oh
went
my
to the
goodness.
DMV.
That's awesome.
So I'm incredibly proud of that client in particular when we're talking about like the driving subject. But like I said, every client's program is specific to the individual. And that's what they really need, is if you got somebody and their top intrinsic motivator is connection, well, their program is going to be very different from somebody who might not ever get lonely and
Mhm.
doesn't really need the same social interaction. And so
Yeah.
that's where we have to really figure out who the individual is kind of early on in the program so that we can be sure that we're guiding them in a way towards a path that is sustainable to them.
Yeah. Do you ever have anybody that meets you in front of the screen that does not want to be there, that it's obvious their parents are forcing them to do this?
So I will say early on, we had 1 or 2 times, and that's where we instilled our 3 rules. And that's also one of the reasons we make sure we do a screening call.
Mhm.
And so I point blank will ask the young adult or teen, I'll say, "Hey, are you doing this because your parents are making you, or do you feel stuck somewhere?" and you feel like if we could just get you unstuck, you would, be having a happier life. And if they just say parents are forcing me, I'll say, you know what? Let's not waste your time right now because it sounds like you're not even open to it. And we'll just tell parents you're not ready for coaching yet. And yet's the key word because I have a young man that is phenomenal. When I first met him, he was 15 and he told me that exactly that. The only reason I'm even talking to you is my mom's making me. And I said, okay, well, let me explain what coaching is. And after I did, he says, no, I'm not interested. I said, okay, it's not for you yet. So I told mom, well, 7 months later, something changed. He came back, was ready to be coached, and he has had an extraordinary experience.
That's awesome. What are some of the most common struggles that these young people face when they come to y'all for coaching?
The number one struggle that all of them have in common is confidence.
Yeah.
Usually, when we come in, it's because they're stuck. And they could be stuck from a social standpoint. They could be stuck from a school or a job or a direction, but it all ties into the identity and confidence. And that's why it's so important to what Pickens talked about is trying to figure out who they specifically are and understanding. Cause so what we do is we go in and we look at essentially their belief system, their intrinsic motivators. And those are just a fancy way of saying, why do they do things? They
Right.
don't even know why they do things. They may like playing video games because it's joyful, but really behind that, there's things that they're meeting that that video game is bringing into light. So we need to know what those things are. We look at their meta program, which is just a fancy way of saying, how do they view the world? We look at their learning style. We look at a few other things, and once we have that, we have a profile to actually connect with them and coach them in the way that they receive information,
Yeah.
which makes a massive difference on the success element. But confidence truly is the place that they're all lacking. And you're probably as a parent, you may have hear other parents and they kind of code it differently.
Yeah.
They may code it and say, hey, my kid's unmotivated. My kid's lazy. It's not a lazy thing, it's not a motivation thing, it's a confidence thing, and when you figure that out, then it's easier to maneuver and move on.
Yeah.
There's other commonalities too, Pickens, if you wanna pick up a couple, you can.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll take it from a different perspective, but I 100% agree with what Blake is saying. I think that confidence is the key that opens so many doors,
Mhm.
downstream when we're talking about social skills, career, things like that. And so if I was going to talk about, something that I see a lot, career is definitely a big one. And the reality is today's job market is not the same as 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, all of that. You're dealing with a landscape that people might not understand the rules that they're playing by. And so, an example of that is, if you've got a very high in demand remote job and you're a new college grad for computer science, as you can imagine, this is a situation we've run into from
Right.
time to time. And what you might not understand is if you're looking at a remote job that's publicly posted online, that job could have thousands of applications. And so they're not hearing back and they're getting extremely disheartened. And so I kind of look at that as a logical, almost similar to dating in a sense where, when you're talking about dating, in a lot of ways, especially on the online world, it is a bit of a numbers game. And so once you understand that, you're able to take some of the emotion out and you can operate under a mindset that will make more sense to get you that success, to get you that job or girlfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, if we're talking about applying for jobs, zigging where others are zagging. The majority of jobs aren't ever posted online. So finding ways to get opportunities that aren't going to be as, saturated with other people. Another example is finding alternative paths that you might not have ever considered. And the way we do that is we'll use, kind of like a comprehensive job mapping process that we put our clients through. But I will tell you, and I know the original question was kind of what's something common. I'm sorry, this is a long-winded answer, but
No, you're good. You're good.
I would say career is definitely something that everybody, neurodivergent, neurotypical,
Right.
everybody seems to be struggling with nowadays, especially for people who are in that entry level. I mean, hiring has just been a straight down trend.
Wow.
And so helping people understand the landscape that they're operating in and giving them strategies, tools that can set them up for success rather than disappointment. Because a lot of them, they are probably disappointed when, you might have applied for 40, 50 jobs, heard nothing back.
Right.
And that's a world that a lot of people won't understand if you haven't applied for a job in the last 20 years.
Exactly. I have family members that have been through that, so I
Yeah.
totally get that.
Yeah.
What what do you wish, both of you, what do you wish people understood about those that are on the spectrum? I know I have 1,000 different things I could say, but what would you all say?
Well, I will tell you that if you go back throughout history and you look at why the world is the way the world is most of the modern, what I would say inventions and technology, who actually created that was
Right.
somebody who was most likely on the spectrum.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
No, there was a story about Michelangelo and talking about how he used to sneak into hospital morgues to do autopsies on bodies, and when they started talking to him about why he did it, it wasn't that he was trying to vandalize, he was actually trying to study the bodies not for science, but for art, and that's what led him to creating the Statue of David and some of the other incredible artworks that he's done. But the way he views things might have been a little
Mhm.
odd and
Yeah.
unique, right? And so when you think about the people, especially on the autism, we have a way that we just see the world differently. And because we see it differently, we can make changes differently.
Yeah.
And I just think everybody has this genius that if we can just unleash it, the world would be a better place.
Absolutely. That's an interesting story. I hadn't heard that about Michelangelo, but that's very cool. How about you, Pickens? Do
Absolutely.
you have anything to add?
Absolutely. And that is one of the most interesting stories that Blake shares. I love that one too.
Wow.
So to me, and I'll just talk about like neurodiversity in total. So the idea of neurological differences, whether it's ASD, ADHD, dyslexia, there are others. I think they're really just natural variations of the human brain.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they view them as deficits, but I truly think they can be superpowers. And so it's not about seeing those differences as, you know, something that's bad, but rather something that's part of human diversity. And so it shouldn't be pathologized. You know, many families, they watch their children struggle, and it's not because they're incapable. It's because the world doesn't understand their wiring. And
Right.
so I think as a whole, what I wish people understood is that if we shift the lens to one of respect and one of possibility, then everything changes, for them and for the people around them. And that's kind of like, you know, essentially at the root of the work we do. I said that it's a superpower. There have been studies that say that neurodivergent people are taking in, sometimes 5 times more data a second
Yeah.
than neurotypical person. I believe it's 50 bits versus 250 bits. And so when I hear that, that tells me it's a superpower and not something that is a deficit. And so I just wish more people kind of understood that.
Me too. I wish you would too. How has doing this work impacted each of you? It's gotta be rewarding.
So it's one of those things where I think if you help people better themselves, along the way, you become a better person too.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an artifact of doing that work. And so when I work with somebody on social skills, I actually think it makes me a better socializer, which
Mhm.
I love talking. So that's really saying something. No, I, if I work with someone on career skills, it's something that I can share with not just my clients, but like I said, this is something that essentially everybody I know who's my age that's looking for a job needs help on. And so I'm able to share that knowledge, share that gift with, a ton of people in my life that are even outside the scope of the work that we do. And so how has it affected me? As it's made me, I would say, even more excited to be able to share knowledge with others and help others because that's something I already like doing, but maybe it made me more capable to do that, I guess.
That's awesome. That's great. How about you, Blake?
So from a young age, I just had this internal drive or flame that it's all about leaving the world better than you found it.
Yeah.
And for me, and I go back to the time where, was diagnosed, but specifically when I started researching autism, the stats scared me.
Mm.
9 times more likely to abuse drugs or get hooked on some kind of substance, 7 times more likely to commit suicide.
Wow.
And, the list goes on. And when I see young adults, not only my kids, I see almost all the young adults that we coach as my kids in a sense. And I don't want them to be a statistic.
Yeah.
And for me growing up, I always knew there was something different. I didn't know, obviously, when I got diagnosed, it explained it all, but I always felt less than. And because I was always the odd kid, I was the kid that my mom would come home, I'd have the box on my head in the yard, and we had a stop sign in our yard.
Yeah.
And I was like 12, 13, 14. And she goes, "Blake, what in the world are you doing?" I said, "Mom, I'm trying to listen to the vibrations of the moon." Because I was big into science and I was
Wow.
trying to build like a UFO detector and all these crazy things. And my parents just thought I was the weird child, but they were very nice in how they described me.
Right.
And so when I talk to a lot of the young adults, that's the pain that I feel. And that's the pain that if we can take that and turn it around and help them unleash their best parts, then what that's going to do is that's going to make a generational impact.
Right.
It's gonna impact everybody around them, but then when they go on, if they choose to have kids and a relationship and things, it's gonna impact all of that, and so it
Yeah.
gets to put a legacy out there of making the world better and having a pay it forward. So I've had several clients that have actually started doing some form of coaching themselves or mentoring
Oh,
to
wow.
pay it forward, and that's just beautiful to see. It's kinda
Yeah.
like butterfly effect a little bit too.
Yeah, I love that. This has all been wonderful, and I could talk to you both all day just because I just love learning about all of this, and I think what you're doing is awesome. Have I not asked you something you wanna talk about or mention before we go?
I do wanna do a shameless plug if that's
Oh,
okay.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, listen, when I post this, I'll have all your information available for people to find you, but please tell everybody how they can find you and what you can help with.
So I just wrote a book.
Awesome.
I released it in October, and it's
Okay.
called the Autism Launch Plan. It's made for parents of level 1 autistic young adults or
Yeah.
teens, and basically, it's kind of the plan that I put together. I put together a 5-year plan for my son. He accomplished it in 3.5 years, and he's
Yeah.
been living independently on his own. And so it goes through the process that I went through to lay out the plan, how to communicate the plan, how to get your young adult to buy into the plan.
Yeah.
And so that is something that I think can help parents, especially understand why their kid is stuck and how to
Right.
help them move forward, and then how to take off Shara, the rescuer hat, and put on the coaching hat, and
Well, I'm adding that book to my Amazon cart when we get off of this call because I need to read that.
it is on there. So, and I tried to it's not a lot of fluff. I tried to I mean, it's everybody's read it that has given me feedback has basically said they really enjoyed that there wasn't all this fluff. There
Yeah.
was more tactical and strategy so that they could actually apply it. And that's the
Right.
way it was really written so that you could start applying these things in small bites to be able to get your young adult or teen moving in the direction that makes best for them.
Small bites is very helpful,
Yeah.
especially for me.
Well, for the parent and for the young adult, because it triggers the nervous system if you go too big, and that
Yeah.
fight, flight, or freeze is so hard to get through.
Yeah.
And what I will tell you is I'm gonna tell you something that many parents, get their eyes get really big when I say this. Motivation is overrated.
Yeah.
It's all about momentum, and what
Mhm.
momentum is it's consistency of little tiny movements. So when you do the 1%, you're not getting outside the comfort zone, you're actually stretching the comfort zone.
Okay.
And so, when I taught my son how to drive, and I have a video somewhere online about it, but basically we did 1% action. So like the first day I taught him how to open the car door. He thought I was crazy because he'd been opening the car door to get in and go places.
Right.
Then I taught him how to sit down and put on his seatbelt, and again, he's going, "I know how to do this. This is crazy."
Right.
But we moved at a pace of just a little bit more every day, and in 30 days, he was driving.
Wow. This has been so wonderful. And I'm glad I've got it recorded for the podcast, but this has been wonderful for me. So I really am adding the book to my cart. I think this is important for my husband and I both to read. So thank you both so much for talking to me today. I appreciate it more than you know.
Pleasure is all ours.
All right.
I'll
Thank
see
you.
y'all later. Bye.
Take care.